It's here. My last service before going on sabbatical. Part of me wants to jump for joy. The other part of me wants to beg our vestry for another delay. Much of what I have read about preparing for sabbatical says, don't do anything overly stressful before you begin. Strive to let parish life be normal, and then begin sabbatical with a period of rest. With the craziness of the month that I've had, including a wedding on Friday night, and the mission trip we have this week, I think I'm going to begin sabbatical next weekend by collapsing on my couch. Then again, maybe not. As tired as I am after one of these trips, there's something about them that energizes me too. Maybe it's the opportunity to work and spend time with our youth. Maybe it's the smiles on the children we meet and serve on the reservation. Or maybe it's reconnecting with those we know in Valentine at St. John's, or the team leaders that meet us across the diocese. Or maybe it's the adult helpers we know on the reservation. Or maybe it's the renewed awareness I get on these trips of the Spirit's presence in my life. After 10 summers on the reservation and 3 in the Dominican Republic, I think I'm going to go with the Spirit. Frankly, as edifying as all those other blessings are, it is the Spirit's gentle and sometimes not so gentle nudging that keeps me going back. And like our youth learn, not because we get more out of these trips than we give, although I am grateful that's the way things work. And it's not because we want to be seen as do-gooders or to have gold stars placed next to our name in the book of life. I go back because it gives me a chance to look past the immediacy of the things before me and the opportunity to see the possibilities that surround me. I believe this is true for many of our youth, some of whom will now have gone with me on 7 of these trips. For me, these trips are like mini sabbaticals. Don't get me wrong, there's not a whole lot of rest. But if sabbaticals are meant to refresh, renew, and rejuvenate us so that we may continue in, maybe even broaden the ministry that we have been given, then what better way is there to start sabbatical than with like a week we are going to have? Besides, there's something we learn on these trips, something we experience that I can only teach about here in the 4 walls of our church. When we go out into the world bearing witness to the love of Christ we know in our lives, we're not taking something new and exciting to people. We find God's love and grace is already there. We may help others to see that love in a new way, but guess what? They help us to do the same. We come away from these trips not celebrating the number of lives that we have changed, but rejoicing in the change we come to know in our own. Parents, look for that when your youth come back. They sense it. Each night we spend a little bit of time in Scripture and reflecting on the day's events. And it's always a blessing for me to hear the passion in their voices. The excitement that comes when all of a sudden they see something they haven't seen before, whether in themselves or in the world around them. And then to watch them lead our worship each evening. I know they're teenagers, and that this change may only last for a little while after our trip is over. But a seed has been planted. Lives have been changed. And one day, their experience of the love of God in and through someone who is not family or a member of their faith community will bear fruit. fruit that helps them see the presence of the Spirit in their lives in a way that was not possible before going on trips like these. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul writes that we are not justified by the works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. Like James, Paul knows that doing is not what affords us God's grace, but it is something that comes out of our awareness of that grace in our lives. The woman who washes Jesus' feet and anoints him in our gospel reading today isn't doing it to look for favor, but she is responding to the grace she has encountered, something the Pharisees just don't understand. I'm not saying our youth completely understand it either on day one of our trip, but by the end, I think they have an awareness they did not have before. As sabbatical begins, we have an opportunity to experience the love of God through more than just family and members of our faith community. As visiting clergy join us in our response to God's love, a response we call worship. We don't come here each week to worship to gain God's favor, but in joyful celebration of the grace revealed to us in and through Jesus Christ, in and through one another, and in and through all those we will encounter along our life's journey. I wonder, as we look back after our sabbatical ends, if like the youth who go on mission, youth who go to be God's hands in the world, who go to meet Christ beyond the four walls of our church, will we come away from our experience with a renewed, refreshed, and rejuvenated sense of ministry and a deeper awareness of God's grace and love in our lives? That is my prayer, and I ask it to be yours. Amen.
Amen.